Chloe McCardell, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
I'm very excited to have you on. We got you quite early on a Sunday morning. Have you had a chance to go for a swim, dip in the ocean so far today?
But not too early for one of you to start drinking beer, I see.
No, it is actually a ruby grapefruit tonic. So
that's what the outside says.
Yeah.
Actually, I went for a swim late last night between 10:30 p.m. and midnight. There's a 24-hour charity swim going on in Sydney, so I did a late night stint, and I'm going to go to the after party actually at 3 p.m. for that. So hanging out for that.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite time of day for the swim? Is it an early morning dip or a late night one? Do you prefer one over the other?
I must say I'm not a morning person, even after 2 decades of waking up at 4:30 in the morning to go to some training. So lately I've been leaning towards afternoon swim sessions, but sometimes I do have to drag my ass out of bed and get to swimming at 5.
I've got a confession to make. I tell people I don't know how to swim, right? I can float, I can get from one end to the other. The thought of being in the ocean, particularly in the evening, scares the shit out of me. I've kind of got these unwritten rules. Lakes, no problem. Rivers, I can deal with that. A lagoon, like an enclosed lagoon. So my mum's from the Solomon Islands. I'm happy with that. Ocean, nah, no chance. That's just for context.
Is it a shark thing? Because I don't think they're hanging out in most rivers or lagoons.
You've picked it. You've picked it early, and I will really scratch away at that shark itch as we go through. But it's just not knowing what's in the ocean scares me. Pools I can handle, obviously.
And your visibility at night is very low, so you can't even see the shark that's potentially going to eat you.
Thank you. Thank you for validating that. I needed that because Stephen thinks I'm crazy for these arbitrary rules he says that I put on things, but I'm just not going in the water.
Yeah, look, we're going to get to some shark chat a little bit later, but I'm excited to have you on, Chloe, because I'm on a bit of a swimming journey myself, which we'll touch on a little bit later as well. But I'm keen to dive straight into the heart of your story, and I want to set a little bit of a platform to allow you to tell it. So here's what I've put together. Started swimming at 11. As a teenager, became an elite swimmer, but not quite good enough to be an Olympian, and perhaps became a bit disillusioned with your path. You tried triathlon and a bit of running, but then in 2007, aged 22, you stumbled upon something special, and this was an 11-kilometer swim where you finished second and felt amazing. So 2 years later, you did your first English Channel crossing, aged 22, and since then, you've done it a further 43 times. But I'd love to start at this point of your journey, that first 11-kilometer swim, and then what happened afterwards to convince yourself to go and do the English Channel that first time.
Yeah, you're about 90% spot on with your fact checking. So at 22, I did my first marathon swim, and at 24, I swam the English Channel for the first time. And what prompted that journey is that when I was 19, I decided I wanted to be the best in the world at something. And I didn't have any particular skills. I didn't have much of a support network around me. In fact, my parents kicked me out of home at 20 and said, basically, good luck with your life. And, you're done. Like, out you go, bye-bye, into the world. So, yeah, at 20, I was really struggling. I was trying triathlon. I thought maybe I could be like an elite triathlete because I had a swimming background. So I was training for 3 sports, working part-time. I was at university part-time. I wasn't really making headway. So after 2.5 years, I ran a marathon and swam a marathon. And that's when I swam that marathon and had an amazing experience. And I thought, well, this is it. Like, I believe I can be the best in the world at marathon swimming. And I knew that I had to go to the English Channel because that is the mecca. It is the jewel in the crown of marathon swimming in the world, not just for Australians or the British or the Americans, but literally worldwide. There's just nothing that compares to it. And then I knew that if I wanted to be the best in the world, I couldn't just go and swim at once, because at that point, over 1,500 people had swum at once. I would need to go and at least do a double crossing. So I thought, rather than start at 1 and then in the future go back and do 2, I'll just go and do 2 on my first trip to England. So that's how my crazy journey started. I went over, and in my first year of English Channel swimming, I decided I'd do a double crossing.
But that's like the first time you did a lengthy swim, was that the 11K? And then the channel crossing is 33. So was it as soon as you did that 11 initially, you thought, actually, you know what, I'm made for this. This is something that I'm going to really push myself to do?
Yeah, exactly. It was like I'd found my calling, that all my years of swim training as a junior were actually leading towards this point, but I didn't know it at the time because I'd created this amazing foundation, if you want to think of it like that way. Cardiovascular fitness, my skeletal structure actually grew as a teenager to adapt to the physiological stress of swimming a lot, week in, week out, year round, because swimmers don't really have an off season. So, I have larger shoulders, I have a larger heart, I have a larger lung capacity, because all that has grown through my teenage years of my natural growth spurt. So I'm really physiologically adapted to swimming. And swimming long distance basically is swimming, but it's more the mental challenge and the resilience, which comes into play more so than the shorter events. And because I had that really strong desire and resilience, I just paired that with that physiological base. Whereas with triathlon, it's shorter, it's more skill-based. If you have a background in running and riding, you have a big advantage, and you're constantly training for 3 sports, which is quite stressful. Like, you need a lot of support around you. You need to travel a lot for that to race. So I guess I found something that fitted like a glove.
So I sort of mentioned I'm on this bit of a swimming journey, and I'm keen to insert myself here and perhaps get a bit of guidance and advice and help contextualize what you're doing. So I was a runner who essentially broke down a year ago, terrible arthritis.
Year ago, mate. 10 years ago.
Can't play sport anymore, so I've started swimming. And
Sorry to hear that.
I got a coach, and my first lesson, I did 2 lengths of the pool, a 25-meter pool, and was exhausted. Never really enjoyed it, but decided I would enjoy getting better at something. So I've been working my way up now in an attempt to try to do a 10-kilometer open water swim, I guess similar to what you first did when you kind of got onto the scene. But I'm finding the mental side of things really interesting. So at the moment I can do 80 lengths, right? Which is really good from where I was at, a world away from where you are. But if I break it down, like, I can't just set out and think I'm going to swim 80 lengths here. I need to break it down into like 20s as a trick my mind almost. Like, I'm going to do 20, and then once I get there, I know I'll do another 20, and then another 20, another 20. When you're setting off to do like the English Channel and it's 33 kilometers, are you having to trick your mind like that very first time when you're doing it that distance? Like, how do you trick your mind, or how do you conquer your mind and allow you to actually do it?
Look, it is a really big mind game. And my first attempt at the English Channel was a double crossing. So I had some really good advice from someone else who completed a double crossing. And she said, think of the first crossing as your warm-up. And then your actual channel swim starts when you start that second crossing. And it was brilliant advice, because in my head, if I thought that finishing the first crossing was halfway or that it was a success, then that little voice in the back of my head always had a fallback that, if something happens, I need to pull out that second lap, then I've already achieved something. I'm already halfway to the goal. Whereas if the first lap is my warm-up, then I know my brain knows that we're not really starting yet. The start is coming soon. So I'm not actually swimming 2 laps of the channel. I'm doing my warm-up, and then I'm going to swim my crossing when I get to France. That's when my crossing is really going to start. And so that worked really well for me that year. And I do think that having great structures, so mental structures to find your ways through things, is great. And for you, it's breaking it down into groups of 20 or laps. For me, it's certain mind games. And this is something I talk about in keynote speaking, is finding something that works for you and helps you get through the tough times. And it can be like just like games. Humans love to be spontaneous and creative, and we like to find joy and fun in our lives, even as adults. I guess we kind of attribute those things to childlike behavior, but adults really are just children that have extra years on their lives and a few more wrinkles. And deep down, I think we're all quite childlike in many ways. So if you tap into the fun and enjoyment in the games, then you can find ways through really hard times or mental challenges.
So I'm fascinated by that mental strength at age 22 and 24, like that, to have that kind of that resilience? Because I'm harking back to 22, 24-year-old Seamus, and I'm like, I wouldn't say I was mentally brittle, but it was far easier to chuck something in than it was to persevere, let alone persevere when you're in the middle of the ocean, not really knowing where you're going. So where did that mental strength come from at that early age?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, and I do get asked that a lot. And I've coached a 16-year-old to swim across the English Channel solo. So, I mean, there's a young girl, you may have heard of her, it was over a decade ago, Jessica Watson, and she sailed around the world non-stop at 16. So young people, whether teenagers or in their early 20s, can definitely achieve extraordinary things that a lot of adults couldn't even consider. So I don't know if it's so much an age thing, but it more like, you know, does the person have the passion? Do they have the desire? Are they set on their purpose? Because I believe when you tap into your purpose or your calling, then things become easier, the pathway becomes clearer, what you need starts kind of coming around you. Because I had to create my resources, my support network from scratch, because when I was kicked out of home, it was like, we don't want necessarily to support you anymore, go be independent. And so maybe at 22, you had other values, you had other, you know, things that you wanted to get up to, and, you know, swimming a lap of the English Channel or two just wasn't on your bucket list at that point in time. But for me, it was so closely connected with the potential of becoming the best in the world at something that it just seemed like a natural evolution to me at the time.
I went for a swim yesterday in Whangamata Ocean. It was one of my first actual ocean swims. I've been sort of training in the pool, but it's totally different. It's totally different. You know, there was currents and waves and all sorts of things. Can you tell us what the English Channel is like? Because is it the hardest swim? It's like, I've heard it described as like the Everest of swimming. Like there's boat lanes and all sorts.
Yeah, it's not like it's laned, is it? It's not like there's lane ropes between the two countries to kind of guide you as like where to go.
Lane ropes. Yeah, so Everest is the mountaineering of English Channel swimming. Just to clarify where we're at here. So double the amount of people have climbed Everest than have ever swum the English Channel. When you're in the English Channel, you don't have hiking gear, you can't have a sleep, you can't have a Sherpa hold your oxygen. You know, no one is going to hold your hand and do any of that work for you. You're in the water in your bather's goggles and cap. The water is between 13 and 17 Celsius, which is not life-sustaining. So that water around you is actually sapping heat from your body. You're constantly under the threat of hypothermia. I've been hospitalized, been 30 minutes from death from hypothermia from English Channel swimming. And then you've got the two lanes of very busy shipping highway that goes through the middle of the English Channel. So as you're trying to cross from A to B, it's going up or down the English Channel depending on which shipping lane you're moving through at any point in time. And those ships are like 800 meters long. They can have 22,000 containers on them. They don't stop. If you get sucked underneath them, you're gone. And yeah, it is that dramatic. You have your own boat to literally help guide you through these shipping lanes. You're swimming through the night, which may be a bit of a challenge for you, Seamus, because of your fear of sharks. But the sharks don't have teeth in the English Channel, so you're absolutely
only basking sharks, right? Only big basking sharks in the English Channel.
Yeah, exactly. And they just cruise around the bottom. They're not interested in the swimmers. But you may be worried about the jellyfish. They might look small and innocent, but they can really give you a bit of a hard time. And they float around the middle of the English Channel generally. And then you've got things falling off the ships. So you've got flotsam, jetsam, anything that you'd ship international, there's a chance it's gone through the English Channel. So if one of those ships falls off in a storm, it breaks open and things just kind of come out and start floating around the English Channel. Then you've got the 2-meter waves. You've got fog that can set in, so you're basically swimming blind out there. You've got tides going at 11 kilometers an hour, and that makes it really hard to finish on France because it's particularly strong on that side. The tide is ripping parallel to land, and you're trying to cross that tide to actually land on shore. And some people, they get washed sideways for hours on end. So they're swimming their guts out. They've already done 99% across the English Channel, and in the last 400 meters, often their swims were aborted because, you know, that mind game that they just can't keep going anymore. They've been swimming for hours. They're making no progress. They see land. It's taunting them. They're swimming but going sideways, basically washed parallel sideways to their goal, and then they just give up. And that particular area is called French graveyard because it's where a lot of swimmers' dreams go to die. So yeah, it's quite dramatic swimming the channel.
It's very, very dramatic.
Yeah, so you've done it 44 times. So obviously you're used to it now. But do you remember that first time when you were swimming it? And you've obviously done this research heading in. Did you think when you were in it, shit, this is as hard as I thought it would be?
Well, my first crossing, I had pretty good conditions. So some days are good in the channel, and it was nearly flat conditions. It was a strong tide, so it was hard to swim against in terms of effort. But I couldn't really fault the first crossing. When I turned around, the enormity of the challenge really hit me, because when I stood up on France to finish that first crossing in 2009, when I looked back to England, I couldn't see shoreline. All I saw was just blue to the horizon, and then on from there. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got to swim all the way back. But I got back in. And then on the way back to England, the conditions really changed. A storm came through with both in force 4 and 5. So it ended up being 2-meter waves for about 5 hours. And it was pitch black by then, and I was definitely hypothermic. I was definitely starting to hallucinate. And then the boat captain lost me at that point in the English Channel. And I was like, don't leave me behind, at the top of my lungs. Like, I was terrified. I was 24. I'd never swum in the channel before, and my boat had just left me behind. They found me quickly, but the thing is, you can't chase a boat. Like, once a boat's on its way somewhere, doesn't matter how fast you can swim, you need them to turn around. And I was just like, God, this is going to be pear-shaped. So I've had a few scary moments in the English Channel. Lucky that didn't turn me off, because then the rest of my career may never have happened.
There's so much as you're talking to kind of process and break down. The first thing I'm just thinking, hearing that story, is you get to France and then you've got to go back again. What's the turnaround time? How long are you actually spending on terra firma before you just turn around and jump back in the water again?
Yeah, so I do laps of the English Channel, literally.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
the first lap, you're allowed up to 10 minutes when you're on land.
Nah, that's
What's really fucked about this, if I can say that.
Yeah, please.
Any time that you take standing on land when you finish that crossing gets added to your return trip. Like, they add it on as if it's your swim time. So you're just like, what?
Yeah, I've got another bone to pick, because I've done. Who made the rules around wetsuits and no thermal caps? Because have they actually ever done it themselves?
They're trying to keep the rules consistent with when the first people swam it. The first man who swam it in 1875, and they definitely didn't have wetsuits back then. And I think you would like this guy. His name is Captain Matthew Webb. And to get across to keep him warm, he drank something quite interesting. Do you want to guess what that was?
Yeah, I think I might know.
Go on, Steve.
Urine?
No. Jesus.
No.
What's
That's amazing. That's amazing. We can't edit that out.
W.
You drink whiskey. You drink
Yeah,
whiskey.
you drank whiskey. And
Not urine.
No.
He had
That's so good.
and he had sugar cubes. So things are quite archaic back then. And they've just tried to kind of maintain as much consistency as possible so that the challenge doesn't get, I guess, diluted as the decades go on.
Is the whiskey still mandatory for the crossing, or is that optional?
Well, we now have much better knowledge of sports science, so we know that it doesn't actually help keep you warm. It actually helps lower your core temperature. So no one drinks any alcohol while swimming the channel. But people do like to sip champagne when they're successful and they're back on the boat.
It's a few flutes for you then.
I was looking at your channel times, and it seems, I think the fastest you did it was 8 hours and the slowest was 12 hours, like a 4-hour difference. Is that right, across the 44 crossings? Like, is that just weather and tides and boat lanes, like the things we've talked about? Or did you get faster as you went on?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. So my fastest time is 8 hours 51, and I was really fit and strong. I was training 70 kilometers a week, most weeks of the year at that point in time. And the conditions were really good. So that was kind of like the pinnacle for me, all things working really well. My slowest time for a single crossing of the English Channel is the third lap of a triple non-stop crossing, so 3 laps. between England and France. 13 hours 31 or something. And you can imagine I was smashed on that third hypothermic. The pain that I was in, like muscular tendon ligament pain, and this my cardiovascular system just kind of shutting down from exhaustion. So I was basically like, you might remember decades ago, there was that Iron Man when the person just like kind of crawled over the finish line and they were half dead. I was basically the aquatic version of that very slow moving car crash as I was finishing towards France. But luckily I made it.
Just to look back to the moody description that you had about shipping lanes and swells and tides and fog and stuff, there's some pretty cool parts to it as well. Like I've heard you speak really passionately about the sunrises that you see. Like I'm a big sunset guy, but talk us through the sunrises on the channel.
Oh, the sunrises are to die for. They're absolutely magical, especially after a really long night. Because the English Channel, a lot of it is the mental challenge as well as the physical challenge. If you are swimming for 6, 8, maybe 10 hours through darkness, and then you see the golden sunlight of the sun that you've been dreaming and needing for hours to come up because you've been cold, or the monotony is killing you, or that little voice in your head you've been fighting for hours, and then you see this golden like glow pierce the horizon and then go crimson red and then just burst into the sky. Absolutely amazing. I can't get enough of it, to the point where I've even gone and bought a 90,000-pound 54-foot boat so that I can run my own business, taking people around England and across the English Channel and things like that. I am addicted to the English Channel. It is my spiritual home. I need to go back there. It's my calling. And I know I'm not going to keep swimming it forever. I've officially retired from swimming it myself. But that doesn't mean that I can't enjoy the beautiful sunrises, doing other activities and helping other people achieve their dreams.
Let's just take a quick little interlude into that, because have I got it right that you've set up like a relay event, and if Stephen's trying to hit his 10K open water, he could be part of a team longer term that enters that?
Oh, for sure. So I signed up a comedian, Tommy Little. You guys heard of him? Aussie comedian.
I have not.
No.
The Project.
No. He mustn't have gone over the ditch. Yeah, The Project.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tommy Little from The Project. I've signed him up to swim between England and Belgium. The start of this year, he could only swim 50 meters, which means that you, Stephen, are actually just at a bigger starting point than him. And he's like, yeah, I want to be in your relay. Because I called up on radio just to chat about stuff. And then I told him, like, hey, Tommy, you want to be my relay? And he's like, maybe. And so, yeah, he's going to be my relay. So you've definitely got potential. Because if he can do it from 50 meters as his personal best starting off, then if you're at 80 laps, you'll smash it.
Yeah. Is training, like marathon swim training, similar to running a marathon training, where you don't sort of need to do the full distance to build up to it? Like, you know, how do you build up to swimming 33 kilometers? Do you have to have done a 33 kilometer swim to know you can do it?
No, absolutely not. Although we do suggest that people swim 6 hours non-stop in cold water before they embark on an English Channel solo swim. But the English Channel solo swim will generally take them between 12 and 15 hours. So if you can do about half the continuous time, then you're on your way to completing the marathon swim.
You're there. You're in, Steve. You're in, mate. Just got to, how many relay? Just to loop. I'm not going to let him get away with this after the urine call. How many in a team for the relay swim? How many more does he have to bring along for the journey? I mean, I'll be in the support boat. Absolutely, I'll guarantee you that.
Well, if you mean the England to Belgium course, then there's 10 in a team. You only swim for 30 minutes, and then you wait for your teammates to do all the rest of the work before it's your go again. So for every 5 hour where everyone rotates, you do 30 minutes swimming, 4 hours and a half hours on the boat, napping, eating, sleeping, socializing. So 30 minutes in, 4.5 hours out. And it just keeps going until they reach Belgium. And then when you reach Belgium, lots of Belgian beer and chocolate.
Done. We're in.
Wow. It sounds incredible. While we're on the coaching theme, I'd love to hear about, so one of the little nuggets that really caught my attention was, I think you might have described it as one of your proudest moments in your coaching is Rick Sierra, who I understand is a farmer from a small town in regional Victoria. In 2019, at the age of 59 and 351 days, became the oldest person to complete a double crossing.
How old?
And
Sorry,
59, just shy of 60, did a double crossing. Now, did he have swim training? Did he have a swimming background?
Not much. He'd actually done a few Ironmans. So there's often a bit of a crossover. People do some triathlon or Ironmans and they get interested in long distance swimming. And often for reasons like you've kind of described your personal situation, they get hip injuries, knee injuries, foot injuries. They want to keep fit, keep exercising, set goals, but no longer running supports them. And so he has a sporting background, but not specifically. He was not a competitive swimmer, didn't have a big swimming background, but he had a tough mentality and he'd done some long distance sport in endurance stuff, and triathlon. And he started off, actually, I met him in events and I was spruiking. I was just going along to these swim events. I was like, swim the English Channel with me. And then he'd just done the 5K event. He came and chatted to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you swam 5K. Sure, you can swim the English Channel solo. And then he signed up to swim the English Channel solo. And then I was on his boat crewing and coaching, so feeding him, motivating him, cheering all the way. And then he got out at the end. He got back in the boat. I was like, Rick, you did so well. You could do a double crossing. And I kind of just left it at that. Like, it was kind of a little bit just, offhand, like, wow, you were so strong, who knows what you do next. Anyway, he took that very seriously. And then a year and a half later came back and said, I'm ready for the double crossing. And I was like, what? So it's interesting when you plant ideas in people's head and you believe they have that potential, and then they start to believe in themselves, like their own potential and the possibilities. It's amazing how far you can go with these things. And that's, I think, is a little bit about my journey as well. Like, I couldn't swim as a kid. I loved swimming. And then I just got these ideas in my head that I could achieve things. And I just kind of slowly worked away at those goals.
I read that in the swim with Rick that you jumped in and did the last couple of Ks with him. As a coach who's seen a student of yours do this incredible feat, that must be the most empowering, special moment ever, right? It makes it all worth it.
Yeah, for sure. And Rick is such a lovely guy, like salt of the earth. He's my friend now. So a lot of my swimmers are really good people, and we enjoy beyond the coach athlete sort of relationship. And I really care about them as individuals, and we go on these transformative journeys together. So when he was finishing that, I'd love to take credit for doing the swimming, though I didn't. He did all the swimming, but it was a journey that we went on together, and he finished and I was there next to him, and we had a little hug on the rock that he sat out on when he finished, and super, super special. And I don't have children, and maybe I will one day, maybe I won't, but for me, it's a beautiful thing to be able to help a person achieve their goals and go on that journey and create those really special bonds.
Specifically the channel, how many of you coached or helped get across? Can you put a number on it?
I've coached over 150 people to swim either solo or in relays between England and France since 2014.
Wow. So you can kind of claim credit to basically 200, because some of those would have been doubles as well. 200 crossings.
No, it's about 160.
I love it. I love that you've got the recall of like all of these things despite having done it so many times. Like, can you actually remember almost all 44 of the crossings that you've done yourself?
Well, I did 1.5 million arm strokes over those 44 crossings. So if I could remember them all, I would be a savant or something. I remember bits and pieces, usually if it's absolutely horrible or absolutely awesome, but I don't remember most hours. And to tell you the truth, it's very monotonous. I wouldn't want to remember most of those hours.
Because break down the actual mechanics of the hours. Like, are they done in like legs of, like, do you do strokes or hours, or when do you stop for fuel, and what does it all mean? My brain's gone crazy here.
So just to clarify, I don't think I mentioned yet, the English Channel, sorry, the screen's bouncing. The English Channel is 34 kilometers. And so what swimmers do is we fuel regularly throughout. I started about 45 minutes, and then on 30-minute intervals, I have liquid, what we call feeds, which is energy in water, warmed up water, because we're trying to prevent hypothermia from setting in, which is a real and ever-present risk. And that comes down from the boat on a rope, or sometimes if I'm having food, which is probably only once per crossing, that'll come down on a feeding stick. But that happens while I'm treading water. So one arm is doing like a little Nemo fin to try and keep my head above the water so I don't drown or ingest water. Then the other hand is trying to have the drink or eat the food, and then my legs have to kick to also keep me up. So people think, oh, you stop and have a rest when you have a fade. And I'm like, actually, no, it's more tiring to do that than swimming. Swimming's less tiring than trying to do this weird treading water thing whilst eating and drinking at the same time. So there is literally no rest. I don't get on the boat. And I know you're probably thinking, how does she go to the toilet? If she's in the water, it's nonstop, I can't go on the boat. Because it's a question that every primary school kid just wants to know the answer to.
Yes.
And my answer to that is, when I swim the channel, I'm a fish. I swim like a fish. I eat like a fish. And I go to the toilet like a fish. So it all happens in the water.
So it is. Because
Shay's got the mind of a primary school.
I do have the mind of a primary school kid.
I figured the quality of this interview, we're probably at primary school level, so we could go there.
That says a lot about our audience. But I did have that question genuinely. I was kind of like, well, you must do. But also to hark back on old mate who set up the rules, you can't touch the support boat either, right? That's where they've got to do the stick thing and the rope stuff.
Yes, so that would be considered cheating or assistance if you touch the boat. So you can't touch the boat, can't get on the boat, can't have sleep on the boat, can't go to the toilet on the boat. No one's allowed to touch you. You're allowed a buddy swimmer in, not the whole time, but on short stints. And they can be parallel to you, but they can't be ahead of you, so you can't draft off anyone. Can't wear a wetsuit, anything thermal. Can't wear anything that's going to give you assistance like fins or a snorkel or paddles, because those things would help you go faster or keep you warmer. So it's very basic rules. But what's quite advantageous is having that boat there. So they set the GPS and they figure out the most efficient way to France. The pilots do that as a full-time job for 3 months a year, and a lot of them have several years, if not a couple of decades experience escorting swimmers. So they're very good at holding an efficient course through strong tides, through the shipping lanes. There's about 600 ships that go through the English Channel every day of all sort of sizes. So they work really hard, they do a good job, and they charge, an appropriate amount of money for that skill set and that niche. And they do a lot of work actually guiding the swimmer. So they guide the swimmer to France, but they'll only go the pace that the swimmer swims at. If the swimmer's a bit slower, the boat just goes at that pace. If it's a bit quicker, the boat goes at a quicker pace. My particular pilots, they like to have guesses about when my particular finish time will be. So we have bets, and usually I'm about 10, maybe 15 minutes within range of what my actual swim finish time will be. And they're always happy when I have a fast day, because they want to get back early so they can get to the pub in the afternoon.
So let's talk about that support group. It's they're obviously very important, but is it always the same group of people, or is it mixed and mingled? I mean, 12 years is a long time, right? So there's naturally going to be some changeover. But the pilots, are they being the same ones the whole time?
That's a very interesting question. And yeah, you referenced that 12 years is a long time frame in anyone's lifetime. And what we're talking about here also, for some context, is an amateur sport. There is no prize money. Individuals pay for the privilege of swimming between England and France. And so it's not like I travel the world on the tennis tour and I have these people that just come with me. It's very much on a shoestring, and I kind of grab support crew from wherever I can. Sometimes I'm putting a call out a few weeks before a swim. I'm like, can anyone crew on my swim? And then I'll get volunteers that I'll just cover their expenses, and they'll jump on and they'll throw me food and they'll do my social media updates. So it's all very, it's kind of like in the late 1800s. It's really amateur, even for myself at my level. It's quite amateur. The pilots have been consistent nearly all my swims over the 12 years, because I found in the second year, I found pilots that were really good that didn't abandon me in the English Channel. And I thought, these guys are really good. I'm going to keep them. And so I kept rebooking them for pretty much all future years. But the person handing me the feeds, that's something that I generally source when I'm in England.
How do you think he lost you? I mean, you obviously know, but like, is it their job to have eyes on you the whole time, and then he's just sort of gone for a drink or gone to the toilet and lost you? Like, what happened there?
That's so scary, eh?
Very scary. It's a very rare thing. In fact, I've never heard of it happening to another swimmer. I mean, it could have. I don't necessarily talk or have notice of what's going on to every other swimmer because we're scattered across the world, different languages, different years, like historically that we're swimming. It's not common. What happened at the time, they were looking for a sandbank because the tides are so strong, as I talked about, that they're shifting sands in some particular area quite frequently. And obviously the boat doesn't want to get banked onto sand. So they had torches out and they were particularly distracted. And, it was only for like 5-10 minutes, but they were going a bit too fast. And in their distracted state, they didn't realize they'd left me behind. It was all over pretty quickly, within 5 to 10 minutes. But, it only takes a few seconds to have the wits scared out of you. And remember, it was pitch black. My first year in channel swimming, 2-meter waves. I was hypothermic. I'd been out there for nearly 25 hours nonstop swimming. So I was in a very depleted state. And they did find me. But that was a good outcome. There was a guy that was lost in the channel once, and he washed up in Belgium a few days later.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. That's the sort of thing you don't forget. Having the good crew is a nice little seg into the 2011, the triple crossing. Now, I watched the 60 Minutes doco from years ago with some incredible footage on it, but it talked about, you got hypothermia, and perhaps for the last hour of the swim, you can't remember it, and the crew was having to decide when to pull you out based on, if you were giving them the right cues and things like that. Can you tell us about that triple crossing?
2011 was a bit of a scary experience. When I mentioned earlier on this interview about being 30 minutes from death, I'm referring to that particular year and that swim attempt. So that was my first attempt at triple crossing. It was unsuccessful. I was pulled out at about 17 hours, and that was in the second leg. So a second crossing or second lap, whatever you want to call it. I didn't even start the third lap, let alone finish it. So that was disastrous. Then I reattempted in 2012, was also unsuccessful. Then I reattempted in 2015 and was successful. So in 2011, I don't remember the last few hours. I was severely hypothermic, but I didn't know it. And it's one symptom of severe hypothermia that the person that's experiencing it actually is not aware. They don't have the cognition and capability of recognizing it in themselves. So it was the people on the boat's call to pull me out of the water. And they were actually telling me to get out of the water for a while. And apparently, because I don't remember this myself, apparently I was just not getting out. And I think that there was something so deep ingrained in me that when I know I'm swimming the channel, subconsciously, I know I'm not allowed to get in the boat, ever. Like, I just never get on the boat. So at a subconscious level, which is what was functioning at that time, because I wasn't conscious, I wasn't lucid, it was, you don't touch the boat, you don't get on the boat. Like, those rules were ingrained in my DNA. And then eventually they tricked me into getting close to the ladder. And then they grabbed my hand and then they said, okay, now you're disqualified. You've got to get out of the water. They had to me to get me onto the boat because I had no idea what was going on. But I must say that if you are going to die, and I guess we're all going to die one day, then hypothermia is a really good way to go because I was in such a happy state. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't mentally distressed. I was off with the pixies. I didn't look great in that 60-minute segment. Like, you probably remember I looked like half dead. But I was in pretty good mood. So, yeah, it's a good way to go. But glad that I lived through that experience and I had another go at it, even though it nearly killed me. I didn't let that deter me.
Yeah, that is, like, you're right. Like, talking to you now, how chipper you are is such a contrast to the vision of you coming out of the water and being in such distress. How quickly do you recover, not just from a missed attempt, but from a proper, like a successful attempt?
It can be really variable. So some days in the English Channel are better than others. For example, if I'm attempting a double crossing and I'm successful, then my recovery is so good that I'm literally doing another crossing on top of the original crossing. So in some ways, if I'm trained up, the conditions are okay, passable or good, if I'm lucky, then I can layer on and do multiples. My last 2 swims last year were within a week of each other. My 43rd crossing when I equaled the world record, which the amazing Alison Streeter held at the time. She's a British lady. She was on 43. So I equaled that, and then that was a really horrible day. So the air temperature was very low at night, and I was inhaling a lot of diesel fumes because of the direction of the wind on that particular day. And when I'm low in the water, I'm actually quite near the exhaust. And I actually got a chest infection, and I thought, have I got COVID? What's going on? I was really under the weather, not sleeping for days, because every time I was horizontal, I would wake up coughing. And then I swam the English Channel for the 44th time within that 6-day turnaround. And I just started my second course of antibiotics, so I still had that chest infection. So I can swim the channel half dead, because a second crossing or third crossing, or if I have a chest infection, I would consider pretty much half dead. But it just becomes harder, more painful, physically painful, mentally stressful. But I did 8 in a season 1 year in 2016. I've done 3 laps in a row, as we talked about. I did 3 in a week that were really fast. They were all under 9 hours, and that was in early 2015, which was 6 weeks before I did the triple non-stop crossing. I used to be super fit back then. So the recovery depends on whether I'm doing singles or multiple laps at once, how fit I am in season, how good or bad the conditions are between my attempts.
Did your support crew grow for the 2013 attempt when you tried to swim across the Straits of Florida from Cuba to Florida? I think I read you had a 32-person support team, and because you were swimming without the use of a shark cage.
Now we're getting
into
the shark chat.
But was that the reason for an extended crew, that there was the shark factor too?
Yeah, so far I've been talking mainly about English Channel experience because that's what I'm most well known for, and that's what I'm the most of. But then I do have these 2 other tropical swims. One that you're referring to, the Cuba to USA swim attempt, that was unsuccessful. But it was 100 miles, which is 160 kilometers. That was what I was trying to swim. And then there's the other successful one, which was in the Bahamas the year after. So that was in 2014, and that was 124 kilometers non-stop, and that was successful. And we got the world record non-stop swim in the ocean. So those particular swims, I did have larger crew. We did have the consideration that many sharks are naturally occurring in Caribbean waters, especially in the Bahamas, and to factor that into the planning, like the risk assessment, and also to factor in that the swims were going to be much longer than English Channel swims, we needed more crew. So we often needed 2 people to fulfill a role that one person could do in an English Channel swim, so that they could relieve each other, have rest. The last thing you want is really tired pilots who, make mistakes. Understandably, if you're very fatigued, any professional can make mistakes. So we needed to have fresh people. Now, particularly with the shark team, which I think you might be interested to hear about, I literally had a team of people who were known as the shark team, and there was a head shark person. So a lot of the history of these people professionally is that they were spear fishermen in the day, and and also dive masters and that sort of thing. So they were very comfortable being under the water, being near sharks. We had a policy, we didn't want to hurt any sharks, so we had different stages of behavior that they would enact, I guess. I'm trying to think of the right terminology here. They would have processes or procedures that they would go through depending on the level of threat from the shark. And so one of the low-level threat, they would get in the water, and with their fins, they would just try and kind of keep a barrier around me without touching me and without being in front of me, so I could continue my swim. They also had another procedure, which was taking in a PVC pipe tube, and just if a shark got close, to push it straight into their snout, just to show them that we were not prey, and that we weren't going to be easy lunch, or I wasn't going to be easy lunch, because sharks don't want to fight hard for their prey. They just want to grab easy prey and then leave. And so a bit of aggression usually turns them right off. That we didn't actually get to that stage, which is great. So there were the entry-level strategies. Now the hardcore strategy, if a shark was circling, because circling activity generally means that the next step would be to have a bit of a taste, a bit of a nibble of what they're wanting to eat. Was to throw in shark bombs. Now, before you get too concerned that we might be hurting the shark bomb is essentially, it's a substance that replicates rotting shark flesh. It's synthetic, so no sharks were harmed to create that substance. So it's created in a laboratory, and it gets put in the water. So apparently sharks don't like the scent of other dead sharks in the area. It's probably like a preventative risk thing. You know, if a shark's died, it could be a bit risky to go over there. And that actual substance we had dripping from the back of the kayaks continuously throughout the swim, so that hopefully that was preventing sharks from even thinking of going to the area. And we had shark shields as well. So there was quite a few processes to keep the swim going. We had a kayak team as well. You're not allowed kayaks in the English Channel, so there was never an allocation for a kayak team in my overall head number for English Channel swimming. So yeah, kayak team, shark team, the feeding / motivation for me team, then the piloting team. So it ended up ballooning out quite a bit. And then it was 2 boats, because you needed 2 boats to actually get all these people on.
It's a massive operation.
Yeah.
And then in the 2011 one, it ended with the jellyfish stinging you, right? And you had to bail after 11 hours. Like, I can't imagine the shared emotion of everyone being disappointed and concerned and getting you off the boat and worrying if you had to get to hospital. Like, everyone's focus is just on you, and something terrible has happened, right? That must have been incredible.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to 2013, the Cuba, USA attempt. And the way it ended was at dusk. There's this beautiful moment where all these dolphins started swimming at the bow of the boat, and I could see them, and I was just having this euphoric connection with nature and just loving it. But then only like 20 minutes later, then in stark contrast, all these jellyfish started rising from underneath, and we're talking like hundreds. I was like, oh my God, this is not going to end well. And they're quite translucent. So I kept swimming as long as possible, and then they hit me in all sorts of directions. And they were believed to be box jellyfish, because we didn't take a sample and we didn't have a scientist to officially identify them. That's the belief that what they were, from the scientist that I sent pictures to later. So what was getting injected into me is literally paralysis poison. So jellyfish, particular types, what they're trying to do is stun their prey so that the prey don't writhe and move and break the jellyfish apart. The jellyfish is broken apart, then, you know, its life is ended, so to speak. So what they try and do is paralyze their prey before that jellyfish gets broken apart. So quick injection of highly toxic venom is the way that they operate. And they just saw me as prey, fortunately.
How many are we, like, what's the level of stinging are we talking here?
I could definitely visually see hundreds. There would have been dozens actually attaching to me, and they were breaking apart on impact, because they're very delicate. So they'll break apart, but they would still, the tentacles still kept stinging. So nematocytes actually kept firing. So nematocytes are in the tentacles, and they still keep firing, even if the jellyfish is broken apart. So as long as those tentacles are still on my skin, the firing process was still happening. The one person that ended up saving me, that got in the water, because I was unable to swim, to move, I couldn't get out of the water. They had a wetsuit on, they had gloves on, neoprene swim cap on, they had booties on. They were really worried themselves, even with all that gear, about getting in the water. And yeah, so they got stung a little bit themselves, even with all the gear they had on, because these tentacles, they're very fine, they're very hard to see. This is late at night as well, so the visibility wasn't great. And yeah, they laid me down on the boat, and it was horrific for these people to see me. I was in so much excruciating pain. It was, yeah, really, it was very confronting experience for everyone, for them, for me.
And how far away from land are you 11 hours into this journey?
Well, I'd only covered about 40 kilometers. And I say only because my goal was 160, right? So for me, I'm like, oh, I didn't even get that far in. So it took a while to get back to America, even at full speed, because I was actually only 11 hours off Cuban shore, 40 kilometers off Cuban shore.
Well, thank you for sharing the toughest times. We always try to drag up the worst parts from someone's career and the lowest moments, but it provides incredible insight. But I would love, and we kind of brushed over it, I'm not going to allow that, your world record swim. Like, we just, and I got a world record swim. But I'd love to talk about that. So October 2014, you set a new world record for the longest unassisted ocean swim, 124 kilometers in 41 hours, 21 minutes. And I broke this down to help contextualize for our audience, which works out to 4,960 laps of a 25-meter pool. Insane to get your head around that distance or what's involved with that. Are you planning, when you're planning this world record swim, are you looking around the world for the easiest path for 140 kilometers or however it will be? Like how do you actually plan to break that record?
The location. Yeah. How do you choose the location?
The location is extremely important because open water swimming is so wild. You're so exposed to the water temperature, the air temperature, the marine creatures who might be living in that particular area, boating traffic, everything I talked about earlier, strong tides, where you can access, where you can get crew to, where you can hire a pilot that might have the experience or understanding of how to get you from A to B, and then the cost, because you're always trying to get costs to an absolute minimum. So there was quite a bit of research done for the optimum course. I'd had quite a few years English Channel swimming and some bad experiences in the Channel. And I knew just intrinsically by that point that cold water swimming for me, there's a point where it becomes life-threatening. So if I'm in the water for long enough, eventually, just like any human, I'm going to get hypothermia. And my gut feeling, and I still believe it, is that I cannot swim 45 hours nonstop in really cold water because the hypothermia will get so bad, it'll be life-threatening, which immediately meant that I had to look at warm water location, but also I wanted the swim to be current neutral so that I wasn't getting a push at any point. So I had to figure out, okay, where am I not going to be in a point where it can be tidal as long as I'm not getting assisted, and it can have currents as long as the current's not pushing me in any way towards my goal. So I had all these kind of criteria that I was ticking off in my head. I'd been to America before to swim around Manhattan Island, so New York City. There's a race you can do there, which is pretty cool. So I'd met a few Americans. I'd made some connections over there. And one of those connections actually had connections in a school in the Caribbean. And he said, this particular school is a sea-based school, very special scholarship school. High school kids go there. They have boats. They go out on marine activities. There's, boat. There's pilots. People, we know the water there. And went through this list and a lot of ticking all the boxes. And I was just like, okay, well, let's give it a go. Let's hope that the weather, is suitable because, it's a complete variable what the weather's going to do. Let's hope the sharks don't bite. Let's hope the jellyfish don't try and poison me, and we'll just see how it goes.
124 kilometers is insane. Again, I need to just say that again because it's such an incredible distance. And I've heard you talk about how you get through the tough moments and how you focused your mind by visualizing that end and putting feet on whatever surface you get to and how that's going to feel. But how did that actually feel? After you've done 124 kilometers, you've broken the longest that anyone's ever swum for unassisted. Was that as nuts. Satisfying as it sounds like it would be?
Did you see the video of my finish?
No, I haven't.
Well, if you do editing post-podcast, you might want to actually pull it out, slice it in now. I look like absolute shit. So people get very worried when they watch this. My face was balloon bloated. Like you couldn't even recognize, like you could hardly see this, like tiny bits of my eyes because my eyelids and all around my eyes was all like puffed right out. Kind of like you'd imagine someone with an anaphylactic shock kind of look going into. These big lips. I was trying to talk and so I could hardly stand. And I'd been burnt severely by the sun. So 2 full days in the Caribbean where I can't reapply sunscreen basically meant I was continually burning throughout the day, which was like 24/7 nonstop feeling of burning pain. And then at night, just to kind of go back to how masochistic marathon swimming is, at night I was stung by jellyfish and it was like the edge of a hot iron pressing into my skin. So at night I was relieved that the sun had gone away. There was some relief to the burns, the pain, but then at night then the jellyfish were coming out. So, I had this catch-22, which was worse the night or the day. So by the end, like I was physically exhausted. I couldn't really stand. But the relief to finish after dreaming for so long of having this world record, but also after year and year of failure in the English Channel. So in 2011, I'd failed the triple crossing attempt. 2012, I'd failed the triple crossing attempt. 2013, I'd failed to swim between Cuba and America, which meant for me, for 3 consecutive previous years, I'd failed my major goals. I had other goals along the way. I got some English Channel successes in, blah, 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 blah. But my main goal for that season was just complete failure for 3 consecutive years. And that was my main activity at that time. Like, I worked part-time, but I didn't really have a career. I didn't have kids. Like, this was my whole life put into this activity. And it was 3 years I wasn't achieving my dreams. So to finally, in that next year, in 2014, to achieve this world record and do what no one else had done and arguably become the greatest marathon swimmer ever, it was relief. It wasn't joy. I had no energy for joy or excitement. It was just relief. Oh, I was so happy I could stop.
Yeah, is it when you see the land? Obviously, when you get there, it's big. But is it sort of goosebumps? Is it that all that overwhelming emotion, everything you've just talked about, when you can see the home straight? Is it like the last kilometer or 2 that you start to really appreciate what you've done?
No, I still don't think you're kind of getting the point. The exhaustion is like nearly being dead. So there is no chance to feel goosebumps when you're in pain and you have exhaustion levels through the roof, or joy. It's just pure exhaustion and need to get something done. So like, you're wanting relief, you're wanting an out, as an out to finish, not an out to abort the swim. So it's this kind of constant desire to get this ordeal over before something happens. Like, I collapse, or I get nibbled on, or something bizarre happens. In marathon swimming, bizarre stuff happens. I can tell you another story if you have time later. So I didn't let myself believe that I was at the end or near the end or celebrate on the way in until I actually walked as many feet, like footsteps past the waterline, and then I was looking at people trying to get validation that I'd actually finished, because I needed them to say, yes, you finished, just in case I was hallucinating and I thought I'd finished and I hadn't, because I had to cross the waterline. So it was like being in this state of anxiety or tension, that I need some verbal affirmation that, yes, I've actually finished, before I can even think about stopping. Like, I would swim on land if someone said, you haven't finished, because imagine someone aborting your swim at 123 kilometers and 900 meters because you thought you crossed the waterline and you hadn't. So there was no celebrating, and I had no energy to celebrate it.
Is there motivation to do further now that you hold the record? Like
125?
Can you hear how much pain I was in?
Yeah, but I've also heard a lot.
But then you say that, and then that was 2014, right? And then the channel one. Hang on, no, I can't trivialize like a channel swim's so much easier, because I think they're all challenging. But you carry, like, in my mind, I hear that, and that's like a full stop on something. But you carried on. You've carried on until 2021 when you got that other record, right? So I'm not sure what my point is.
No, I get what you mean. I could have retired and I'm like, yay, I'm on a high, I've reached the pinnacle. And I could have, yes. But I had this nagging thing that I wanted to complete this triple crossing. So only 3 people had ever done it historically. It was 25 years prior that the last person had done it. And actually, a Kiwi is one of the 3 people that had done it before me, an amazing guy, Phil Rush, incredible marathon swimmer. He actually escorts swimmers between the North and South Islands in New Zealand. So there's
have you done that one?
National swimming news you might be interested in.
Phil Rush.
Anyway, so I digress slightly. I had that monkey on my shoulder, so I went back to the channel to achieve that. And I did the next year. So I had 2 years of these massive highs, doing the Bahamas swim, getting the world record. And the next year in 2015, I successfully, on my 3rd attempt, did that triple crossing in the English Channel. So, and I could have retired then. But by the point when I'd done the triple crossing, I think I was at something like, I'm going to guess, I'll be like 21 crossings. No, I wasn't. Sorry. I can tell you, I was at 13 crossings in the English Channel at the end of 2015. And I thought, okay, well, 14 crossings. No, 13 crossings. Sorry. If I do 6 more, I can equal the Australian record. Sorry, I get my numbers mixed up. Anyway, I knew that if I did, it's hard when my numbers keep moving and things like that. If I did, 7 more crossings, I must have meant 13. 7 more crossings, I would get 20 crossings of the English Channel, and then I'll be 1 ahead of the Australian record. And I thought, if I've already done 13 crossings of the English Channel, I should have the Australian record. Like, come on, how could I not have the Australian record? I've done so many. So I thought I'll just do another 7, get the Australian record. And then when I was training up to do 7 in one season, I thought, if I do 8 in one season, then I can have the record for most in any one season. I'll go for 8. And then as I was doing the 8 over a course of 4 months, because it takes a lot of time to kind of get in, recover between swims, etc., I thought, okay, at the end of the season, all going well, I'll be at 21 crossings of the English Channel. Yes, I'll have the Australian record, but I'll be halfway to the world record, like halfway. So it was really in that year, 2015, I was like, well, if I'm halfway to the world record, I may as well just get the world record. And so I've just been like eating away at it since, because I coach so many people to swim the English Channel. I'm there for a few months every year anyway. I just tie it all in to the same trip.
When you're doing these and achieving these accomplishments, is there a big media following? Like, is your profile big enough that people are wanting to come on board and sponsor you? You mentioned it's amateur, and that I don't think you're recognised by this sort of Australian swimming or whatever. But like, where does the money come in to help you fund all of these crews and your whole?
Oh yeah, it's super expensive. I spent well over $1 million on direct swimming costs over the last decade. So. Wow. Yeah, well over, and that's really small budget. I guess small budget stuff, really, when you consider how much I could have spent if I was a professional sort of activity, doing it as a professional activity. So some of it is coaching. I charge people to swim the English Channel because I offer a professional year-round service. Sometimes people are on the program for 2 years before they actually get over to swim to England. I crew on their boats. I see them every day leading into their swims, train with them in Dover Harbour. I run swim camps. So that's a business I run. I do keynote speaking. I've been flown to Singapore twice to speak to different IT companies. What else do I do have sponsors. I've had some that just jump on for one particular campaign because it's aligned to their values, or they want to get behind it for some reason. And I have one sponsor that's been with me for 7 years because they just love what I do and they want to support an Aussie doing great things overseas. So yeah, it's a variety of sources, but unfortunately nothing at all from Swimming Australia, which is challenging because I'm also not eligible for any awards. I'm basically a non-entity as far as Swimming Australia is concerned. So no support from them, but corporate support and my work has kept me going over the years. And I also get a lot of volunteer support as well. So I mentioned earlier that people will crew on my boats, and essentially I'm just paying their basic expenses. So that's like fuel, accommodation, bit of petrol. I actually mentioned petrol already, but so petrol, accommodation, and they are really volunteering their time to do that for me. So I do rely on volunteers as well, and so I'm very grateful to the international swimming community and everyday people that have done something to help me along the way.
You're obviously a very accomplished communicator. When you do communicate now, what do you draw more on your successes or your missed attempts, or is it a combination of kind of both of those that you draw your life lessons from?
I think it's more important to show how hard the journey's been and how commonly I've failed at things. Like I failed at my first double crossing attempt. I failed the first 2 attempts at triple crossing. Because if I just talked about the things that I've achieved, then I think that people listening to that, a lot of them would feel like I couldn't identify with my journey, or that, yes, Chloe can do that, but that's her. She's different. Doesn't mean I can do these things. And so I try and draw parallels with the fact that I started swimming so late. And I'm not sure about New Zealand, but in Australia, people generally, they're middle class or upper class, not that we really have a class system, but you know what I mean, like that demographic. They start at 3 and 4 years of age. So if I can show people that I started at something late, but I could still excel at it, or if I can fail constantly at the triple crossing of the English Channel and yet still do it a few years later, I think that then resonates with people and go, okay, maybe I don't have the head start others have, but I can still give it a good go and likely be potential. Or or help them understand that you're not necessarily going to achieve your goals on the first attempt, and it may take multiple attempts. And then I had this little structure. I call it Channel Your Dreams, and I talk through a lot of the processes that I use to achieve my dreams, which they can use themselves in their own lives, whether it's sporting or work or school. And I try and give people as much tips and inspiration as possible, because at the end of the day, my story is about me, but I need it to mean something to them, because when they go away at the end of that, I want them to feel like they're empowered to achieve their dreams.
And one of the other things that makes you relatable outside of the swimming journey is the fact you now speak quite openly about your domestic abuse situation and using your platform to bring those issues to light.
Yeah, I'm quite passionate about this. It sometimes is difficult to talk about, but I think it's very important and necessary. And when I went through this experience, it felt quite isolating. Like I couldn't really have conversations with people about it. I couldn't necessarily reach out, get the support I needed, because in a way it's a bit of a taboo subject, or people are a bit awkward. They don't know how to support you. They don't know what to say. And often people have good intentions around a survivor of domestic violence, but they accidentally say things that are inappropriate. And, I had that experience myself, and that can turn off people like me from talking, because they might have negative experiences when they do talk. So I talk publicly to the media, and I go and talk in keynotes when I'm asked to talk about that particular topic. And I share a bit of my experiences, what I went through. I had a very negative experience dealing with Victoria Police. I talked very openly about it. The police officer, when I called them one night, victim blamed me at my front door when I'd called them for support. They evicted me from my home, even though I was calling them for support, even though my perpetrator had a history of violence. So I guess that I had a very difficult experience, and I'm still quite angry about what happened, and I can use that in a positive way. Not angry like I have poor coping mechanisms like drinking or partying or those sort of things, which is a route I could go down, or taking drugs, but taking that anger and go, okay, well, how can I use this in a good way? How can I channel it for positive change? And I've also lobbied Parliament for change in laws here to support and also prevent domestic violence. When I say support, I mean support survivors, not the actual activity. So at a legislative level, I'm trying to put my voice out there for a positive change, but then also at a community level, I'm trying to connect with people, and also, to show people what red flags that they could be seeing in their own relationships, or in the relationships of those around them, in case someone in their sphere is experiencing domestic violence, because it's not a subject that's really chatted about really widely. I think that the more that we can talk about this, then the better we can as a community address what's going on, prevent domestic violence, and support survivors. So yeah, it's another passion of mine.
I think it's really incredible what you've done. You've produced this platform to tell this really important message by these incredible feats. I just want to dig in. I've got a few other questions about I guess the technical side of things. So like the 150 swimmers that you've coached to swim the channel, would you be technically like in the top 5% of actual swimmers? I guess what I'm getting at is like, why is it that you hold the world record for the longest unassisted swim? Is it, and what's the breakdown of mental to physical? Are you an incredible swimmer with the mentality, or is it just like 95% mental, 5% physical?
This is really interesting, and it is a bit topical in the channel swimming community. They're trying to figure out of a percentage how much is physical and how much is mental, and a lot of them talk about, oh, it's it's mainly mental. It's 70% mental, it's 30% physical. And when I got into channel swimming, I thought that's really random. For me, it's nearly all physical, because there wasn't that big of a mental challenge, because in my mind. And I think I'm fairly unique in this way, but I would encourage others to think like this. In my mind, I saw myself as that was my future. Like I was going to be an English Channel swimmer. So there was no doubt, like, oh, I might not achieve it. Yes, I was worried that I would struggle in the elements, that, my body physically would struggle and it'd be hard, but I didn't doubt myself. So there wasn't a mental struggle that, am I going to make it? And is it going to be really hard? How am I going to handle the pain? It was, I knew, well, Like I knew I would make it kind of to the other side. Not that I always did, but I had this self-belief. So for me, it didn't really have that mental challenge as a high percentage, but for a lot of them, they do. So it depends, I think, how much training you do. If you do minimal training or if you do poor quality training, a lot of channel swimmers do poor quality training. And what I mean by that is they do lots of hours at low intensity aerobic level, and then they struggle in the channel because they're getting pushed around by the tides and they're making no progress. It's like, well, yeah, because you didn't train properly. So for them, it is a mental struggle because they're not making forward progress. And so I can kind of get that. Or people that haven't had, let's say, a lot of chances in their life to practice being mentally resilient. If you put them in the English Channel, they're going to get really overwhelmed. People that don't do cold water training because they live in Mexico, for example, and don't want to travel to find cold water, they're going to physically, struggle, and then mentally they're going to struggle. So I'm really undecided about the breakdown of physical versus mental. But I do think growing up as a junior elite swimmer was absolutely pivotal. Like if I didn't have those years, I would never have turned into a marathon swimmer. I probably would not have been as ambitious, as competitive, as driven. So I'm very grateful for having the opportunity, having amazing role models as a teenager in my swim coaches that believed in me and then encouraged me to push myself. And they were like, if you want to achieve what your goals are, you need to work hard and you need to come to training 7 times a week. You need to be at training, this time, 5 a.m. and like that's the expectation. And so there was the expectation that you had to work hard, and intensity in the swim sets was really high. Not every set, but a lot of them. And so I physically practiced pushing myself mentally and physically for week in, week out, year in, year out. And so it became normal to me. And people that don't have a competitive background or they've done sports that aren't as cardiovascular demanding, I think that, pain to them can be a bit scary because they haven't necessarily pushed themselves to those horrible, difficult heights and got through it. But once you push yourselves to those horrible heights and get through it, you then have the understanding personally that I can do this. I have survived this. And I know I can live through this. It feels like I'm dying, but I'm actually not dying. My lungs are just sore because I'm going at a high intensity. So those years were really formative. And I think that's part of the advantage that I have. Not I have any innate physiological advantage, but I had a great training base physically, mentally as a teenager under pressure and performing, that I took that and transplanted it to the open water and just ran with it and just thought, okay, how far can I swim? And when I reach my personal limits, can I test the limits of marathon swimming in the human condition and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing? And then I found it, and the other side of it's death, and I don't want to go there.
I've also heard you say that you believe everyone can be the best in the world at something, and you've obviously proven that you can, which is an incredible thing to think and then to actually follow through and do.
Execute. Yeah.
But what led you to that statement? Why do you think that everyone has the potential to be the best in the world at something?
Well, I make the statement because I'm a bit dubious of these personal development gurus out there that spruik, you can be anything you want in your life. And typically they're like white privileged males that come from, middle class. And then they're like, rah, 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 you can do whatever you want in life. And I think that people have extraordinary potential, and we all have the potential to excel or be the best in one thing. But I would personally not extrapolate that to say anyone can be anything they want, period. Like I think that's a little, for me, it's a stroke too far. But my journey literally from 19 has been, how can I be the best in the world at something in sport? Because I lean towards sport as my particular skill set. And I failed. Like I wanted to be an elite triathlete for 2.5 years. I worked really hard. My results were shit. But then also I had like no support around me, and I could hardly afford to eat, let alone train properly. I was getting sick constantly because I was so run down. So there's a context there, but also I still was struggling to progress. And I'm not like an amazing athlete. I would have gone to the Olympics for swimming. I would have gone to the Olympics for triathlon or got close. I wasn't even close to either of those things. But I kept finding and adapting and figuring out, okay, well, where does my skill set lie and where is my passion lie? And then I ran a marathon, I loved it. And then I swam a marathon and loved that even more. And my results was even better. And my connection to the marine life was incredible. And so I just kept searching and trying and adapting. And I didn't find marathon swimming as the first thing. It took me a few years to find it. And so I do believe genuinely that people can be the best in the world of things. Like J.K. Rowling, she wrote a book, like the first one, I don't know, when she's in her 40s, right? Single mom. Like, there's amazing stories of people achieving incredible things that you wouldn't even necessarily expect that sort of person to achieve things. But they found that one thing that they could excel at. And even if it was later in life, they didn't necessarily find it as a teenager or as a kid or someone in their 20s. And I really believe in that very firmly.
Now, our oceans are polluted, right? And you've been in them for a long, long time. Have you noticed that difference? And second part to that is, what's the most random thing that you've actually seen in the ocean or identified in the ocean while you've been in there and gone, what the fuck is that doing here?
I'm from Melbourne originally, and after rain, there's a lot of runoff. There's a lot of rubbish that goes into the bay. Now, I don't know necessarily if that's been increasing over the years. It's a concerning thing. I'm in Sydney, and there's a lot of runoff here as well when it rains. So personally, I can't say I've seen an increase in, say, the reduction in water quality or the increase in litter. I think it's an ever-present concern. It concerns me. It's a worry, but I can't really personally identify a trend. The random things I've seen swimming in the water when I was swimming the Bahamas World Record, it was quite boring because for the first day it was just blue because it was so deep. It was just blue, 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 crystal blue, gorgeous, but no corals or anything. And then like the second day, it was just sand, sand, sand. It was much more shallow. And I'm like, okay, well, at least it's not blue, but still boring. But then after a while, I saw these what looked like rocks, but they were all about the same size and same shape. And then it started to be a pattern because they seemed to be distributed about evenly. And I thought, wow, am I hallucinating? Hallucination is a thing in my long distance swims, or is this really happening? And then I kept swimming along. And then after a while, I thought, they're probably turtles because they look like turtle shape and they're turtle color. I couldn't quite tell because of the distance they were below me. And then I kept swimming along. I thought, well, there's no other fish. There's no other, rockery or anything around that. This is very odd. And then I thought, oh, they're not turtles. They're turtle shells. Like there's nothing alive in them. And then I found out a few days later when I was doing research that it was basically a turtle graveyard because many decades ago they would fish for the turtle meat and they would just dump the shells over the side and they were distributed just for kilometers and kilometers on end.
Oh, wow. That's a bit grim.
Yeah.
You were wanting a shark story, right? You were wanting like, and this one day the shark came up to me and it was going to take a bite, and then I punched it in the nose and it swam away and saved the day or something. Yeah, and I don't have one.
No, I was thinking like a container like had fallen off a ship and opened up, and there was like a whole bunch of, I don't know, stuff floating around, but clearly not.
Well, how about this
Submarine?
one? When I was, I have seen submarine in the distance, but I was on the boat. I was crewing for swimmer. I was swimming between the two islands in the Bahamas, this world record. And the second night, I saw this blue strobe flashing in the distance, and then it got closer and closer. And I was like, oh my God, is it aliens? What the hell's going on? Because I thought possibly I'm hallucinating and I don't want my crew to know in case they think that I'm going downhill and may abort the swim. I won't tell them what I can see or that I'm worried. I'll just pretend it's not there and keep swimming. Because if there's a real concern to my health and safety, they'll pull me out of the water anyway. So I'm like, I'll just trust that they've got this sorted. Kept swimming, freaking out. I even hid behind a kayaker for a while and kind of just treaded water, hoping this thing would go away because it got really close. So freaking out. Anyway, it went away, and then I just kept swimming, pretending nothing had happened. And then a few days later, I was like, what the hell happened in the swim? And they're like, oh, it was just the Bahamas Navy coming to check you out in the middle of the night because they didn't understand what was going on. And they brought a boatload of men with machine guns to check out what was going on. And I was like, ooh, well, I'm glad that this is a threat.
Wild stories, eh?
It's crazy,
If you have a
eh?
story about swimming so far in the ocean that the Navy's coming to check you out. It's so good. Yeah. There's been so much gold in this. I've got one question. How you can obviously swim incredibly long distances, but how far will you swim by yourself? Like, do you always swim with a support person, or like, is there a distance that you're comfortable doing yourself?
I always suggest that people swim in open water with a buddy because of boat traffic. Swimmers have been hit by jet skis before, even killed.
You have a buddy yesterday, Stephen?
No, I didn't, but I wasn't going that far.
Or you could have a heart attack or an aneurysm, stroke in the water, and because you're in the water, you'll just drown instantly if it's bad enough. I mean, if you go to cardiac arrest. On land, someone's likely to see you and they can call the ambulance and you're not immersed in water. So it's always safer to swim with someone else. That's my standard answer, and that's officially my answer. Do I swim by myself sometimes? Yes, I do. But it'll be very close to shore and very limited in time. So probably by myself, the most I would swim is 2-3 hours. Then I get out.
Just a gentle 2-3 hour swim.
That's
a biggie.
You know what's the coolest? One of the coolest things about doing this podcast is that we'll get somebody on who's like the best in the world at something, world record holder, like the GOAT of channel swimming, and you're like, actually, you're just a normal person, so approachable, so easy to chat to. You know, we kind of like, you know, I'm not taking anything away from your achievements, but we pedestal people that have done amazing things. But the refreshing thing about it is you're just like Stephen and I, except you can swim massive distances. It's so cool. It's so cool.
That's my point, especially with keynote speaking or even speaking to the media, having that platform to speak to millions of people instantly. It's basically saying, if I'm an ordinary person and I can achieve this, well, then you can too. Maybe it's not marathon swimming, but whatever it is that's special for you. And yeah, I'm totally normal. Like, I have normal person's issues every day. I'm like, right now, I'm like, am I going to renew my lease for 12 months or am I going to stick to month to month? Like, I have very normal everyday issues just like everyone else. I'm very average.
Except at swimming.
Except an exception.
Except at swimming, where you can swim for 41 hours and 21 minutes, which is just outrageous.
Hey, that has been amazing. Shay, did you have any last bits and pieces before we wrapped up?
No, that was kind of my last point. Is that how amazing it is just to have a chat with someone who's so normal but has done such extraordinary things. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chloe, for giving us your time. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot, and it's been so entertaining. So yeah, we really appreciate it.
And where can we find out more info? You got a website, right?
I have a website. I'm on socials as well. It's my name, so chloemccardle.com. And you guys can pop it on in the show notes or something afterwards if you like. It'd be lovely to connect, especially for anyone listening in Australia or anyone traveling to Australia or anyone who wants to swim between England and Belgium, because we go on lots of fun adventures.
Stephen's going to sign up for that. I'll hold him to it. We've just got to find 9 more people, and Stephen and the Between Two Beers team will be doing that relay swim.
Very good.
Cheers for your time.
Cheers, guys. Bye.